All right. Ah, good morning, afternoon, evening, Soul Coffee community. How we doing, baby? Dr. Jamal Fruster here. If this is your first time, welcome to Soul Coffee, the number one podcast dedicated to being able to uplift and increase the energy, the adaptability, and the recuperation of the exhausted provider. Today's guest and this episode is pertained around a very important topic that I think is taboo. And I think it's also part of our nature, and that is the topic of grief, as it is just natural for us to experience death, quite literally. However, I think the impacts of death when it comes to when you're a small business owner, when you're a parent, when you're a healthcare provider, especially when you just got to be on to the next patient, on to the next thing. You don't have time to process the deep layers and levels of grief that we might experience or you might experience in the hospital setting or in the work setting. But this is also the personal aspect of grief, as my great friend TC Chicago, she is a sound facilitator here in Tucson. She had a few lifetimes of different careers before she found this as a modality, but then she is also an expert on grief, which I'm going to get the number wrong, but she shared with me, I believe there's over 20 or 30 different kinds of grief. And I was like, oh no, that's a lot. And I didn't know that. And I think that is very important because I think when humans, providers, of course, can be able to negotiate with more peace, clarity, and understanding and awareness of how these natural processes of death and how these big experiences of grief impact the physiology of the body, the mental and emotional stability, and also the spirit as well too. I find there to be a lot of peace and ease, as this has been a big year for me in death in a lot of different ways too. So this episode is going to be potent and specific for people that might be struggling or might be foreign to the concept of grief. So wherever you may be, fasten your ears into the next 30 minutes to 45 minutes of flow and connection. And please welcome to the show my good friend TC Chicago.
Dr. J, thank you. Always a pleasure to see you, my friend.
Ah, yes, so good, so excited. I am so grateful. And yeah, I'll just start there. I'll just ask, how many different kinds of grief are there from what you found?
Well, we like to put a number on everything because we're cerebral and we like to have
Yeah.
starting points and ending points. But once we get into the definition, you'll sort of be maybe even mind blown as to the different types. So let me define grief first,
Yes.
and
Yes.
that's going to open up the entire conversation.
Sounds
And
great.
thank you for having me on, and thank you for allowing me your platform to speak about the least discussed topic in the English speaking world.
Hmm.
And seriously, nobody wants to talk about it. So, what is grief? Grief is the natural and normal reaction to loss of any kind. It's also the response to any change in behavior or pattern. Let me say that again. Loss, grief is the natural reaction to loss of any kind. It's also the response to changes in patterns or behavior. So that can be hundreds, maybe thousands, because every situation is very individual.
Hmm.
We could probably narrow it to 40, 45 if we needed to and kind of subcategorize that if you want to. I know how your brain works. But so change really is kind of the foundational word here. Change that can create loss, and if we're not in a regulated nervous system, we're not processing anything properly. And
Mm.
grief, that is the natural reaction, is a huge bundle of conflicting, confusing emotions. So it's really a manifestation of changes in our life.
Hmm. Man.
Mhm.
And that's I just the basic definition of it, the reaction to loss or the natural response to changes in patterns. And with patterns, I also think of thought patterns. So as I'm just taking another provider, when there's so much quite literal change, change is the one constant, if anything, in a very intense time in life and society, as well as you put that into life or death, of course, change is the main thing. So if you don't have a good relationship, and by good, I just mean a sustainable, a humble, understanding of change in your relationship to it. And of course, with grief, well, then, like you said, it's going to compound and it's going to bundle up. And one thing I'd love to be able to hear, and I think it's important for the listeners to hear, is, a little bit more of your story and how you and why you got connected to understanding grief. As from my understanding, there was a series of losses in a very short amount of time, which it's like you got pledged by the universe into understanding this medicine. But I'd love for you to just share a little bit more.
Yeah, thank you for that platform. It's always a little nerve-wracking, but also very humbling and gratifying to be able to share my story because what I find is it's so many other people's story. And when somebody's speaking their story and there's a connection, it's like, oh, almost like giving permission to be able to share, something that,
Hmm.
might be embarrassing or shameful.
Sure.
So about 12 years ago, my kids were growing older. They were graduating. They were moving out of the nest. That was the end of it was the end of a marriage, 25-year marriage. We had a business together. That business died. I was in school getting my psychology degree. The end of that was coming to fruition, which was a celebration, but also there were people that I was seeing on a regular basis that I no longer was seeing. So a lot of my foundational a lot of my foundation was really rocked. And I just couldn't really wrap my head around so many changes at once. I was gathering tools, but I didn't have the understanding that this was loss that I was experiencing, and how do I process that through to come to completion with
Mm,
that. And what I began to understand is if we don't have the ability to tell the emotional truth about something, we can't come to completion with it.
mm,
And so once I finished my degree, I just began seeking. And I had been through many years of counseling. I had some early childhood sexual abuse, some parental neglect, if you will, not having the ability to communicate that abuse to my parents. I just didn't feel safe. And so
yeah.
carried that with me into my early 30s. And so I had done some talk therapy, some cognitive behavioral therapy. And I just found that I could talk about it all day long, but felt like I needed to take action. I knew that I needed to move it through my body. I began doing yoga. I got my certification for yoga. And I just began to understand that this really was a grieving process. I was grieving an old way of life, although the new things that were coming into my life were fantastic. And my old belief system said, suck it up, buttercup, look what you have in front of you.
Mm,
But I wasn't processing the old stuff. I wasn't able to bring that to completion by telling my emotional truth about it. And so I really was seeking new tools because the old ones were just leaving me exhausted and really frustrated.
mm,
So over the course of time, I got my yoga teacher certification. I began doing some breath work. I began teaching others how to move energy through their bodies and through their voice, through breath, or through their mouth, through breath. And then just began putting two and two together and started coaching people, educating people on all of these things. We're a holistic being. We're an intellectual being. We grab information and we process it through our brain. We're also an emotional being. So we take that energetic part of that and we process it through our hearts as emotional. And then we have to process it through our body sometimes if we don't have a regular movement practice because our bodies are made to move. You deal with trapped emotions every day when you're working on people's physical bodies, right?
Oh yeah, it's fascinating to appreciate the human experience and how it's held.
hmm So just beginning to take all of these little components of information
Hmm,
and put them all together. And I just began guiding people through a series of education and then through a series of action steps. And really looking at what is grief, what are our belief systems around grief, and looking at our timeline of loss, and understanding that all of those things, if not processed, really can begin to pile on. And I tell people it's like having a backpack, and with every loss it's like putting a stone
mm,
in that backpack. And some
mm,
stones are little pebbles because they're small losses, and others are big changes, and they that if we don't regularly offload those emotions out of that backpack, it just begins to land and manifest in the body as disease. So when you're looking
Mm,
at life through through the lens of grief, it all goes back to changes and losses.
mm. One thing that I think TC just shared that's so important is that backpack analogy. And I want y'all to think back to even just your high school careers or undergrad careers, graduate school careers. Where are the areas in your life where you might have not have examined or could spend some more time examining, where you might have experienced some loss, yet you didn't have the time, space, or awareness to be able to pay homage to that? As that's one thing that I hear, is just paying homage, honestly, to the human experience and I mean, respect to nature and we're not aware because I think that there's been a loss of ritual and ceremony. Of course, there's funerals per se, but I mean, I think one of the most powerful lessons that I've done while I've been alive is thinking of my own eulogy, which is a challenge by my boy Dr. Brett, and being able to think about the end in mind. And oh, this is perfect. I just read the Daily Stoic, and December is I think it's a memoir to death or it's an appreciation of like, oh, it's like a memoir to mortality. And one of the things that I just shared today was just something simply like the man or woman, the human who does not know themselves is the one that fears death most.
Sure.
And I think what a great opportunity to appreciate the human experience at all the little vantage points as much as we can. As
Yeah.
I imagine with you sharing your story, there's a lot of people that can resonate with that. And one other question I'd love to know is, from what you've seen, what are some common misconceptions when it comes to grief?
Yeah. Well, let me just kind of let me you brought up the teenage years, high school years,
Oh man, yeah,
beginning
yeah, yeah.
career. Let's go back a little bit further.
Let's do it,
Okay. Let's go back to when we were little kids, when we were
man.
learning our attachment styles with our caregivers, mom and dad, brothers, sisters, when we were learning about how we see life. We learn that from our parents and from our immediate surroundings, our caregivers, if parents weren't the caregiver. But just think about, you had your kitty cat there. Think about these little kids that have little puppy dogs or kitty cats or any other,
Mm,
loves. I mean, our pets are probably our first loves as little kids.
mm,
And that pet dies and our hearts are broken and we don't have the verbiage to articulate how we're
mm,
feeling. We just cry, we just miss it, we know something inherently is wrong with our hearts are broken, and we go to mom and dad and we say, hey, I'm really sad, I miss little Fluffy. And mom says, oh honey, don't cry, which is the message, don't feel how you're feeling.
all right.
And then maybe a few days later, you go to dad and you say, Dad, I'm really sad. I really, what's happening to me? And dad says, don't worry, honey. We'll go down to the pound this weekend and we'll get you another kitty cat. Message from dad, we can replace the loss. So those are two big ones. Also, give it time, be strong for others. Grief is linear. Everybody has the same process. So there's all of these belief systems that we were taught, whether it was from caregivers or, our education system. So we learn to isolate, and that if we express ourselves the way that we're meant to express ourselves, we're told, don't do that. Don't cry, or go in your room and cry, nobody wants to hear it. So from very early on, and I'm not saying this is the case for everybody, there are some very self-aware parents out there that really did give their children the language to give a voice to what they were feeling and to have an understanding of allowing them to process that. But by far, we're just not taught that.
Yeah.
And then the typical education were the 5 stages of grief, which tells us you have a box, you
Hmm,
have 5 stages that you're going to go through in this
hmm,
very specific order.
hmm,
Again, I don't experience grief like that, which makes me
hmm,
feel like there's something wrong with me. I need to go
hmm,
isolate and I need to do this process alone, which is horrifying, to have
hmm,
the guilt
hmm.
and shame around this natural and normal process.
Yeah.
And so, and then we get into our teenage years, our young adult years. And the blueprints that we were taught way back are going to be the blueprints that we bring into
Right.
our current unless we have the tools that are going to allow us to complete that.
Yeah. I love how you say complete as I mean, one question that just comes in as soon as you say that is, how do you know that someone's grieving process is complete? Because I think about my mom growing up. She had a son before me. My older brother, he passed when he was 5, and I grew up going to the cemetery with my mom and just watching her just cry and feel all the things for his birthday, just feeling so deeply connected to him. And my mom's always reflected like, oh yeah, no, it's going to be like it's an ongoing process. But for you, what would you reflect if someone's like, well, how do I know when I'm done? Or when is enough enough?
If I had
Mm,
that answer, it would be magical. My
mm,
dad died 5 years ago. And just the other day, I was out in my mom's garage and I was helping my sister put something together, and we were rummaging through my dad's toolbox, and tears just began to flow. It's just a natural process. Did it feel the way
mm,
that it felt when he was dying or shortly after he died? No, because I was able to communicate those things that I needed to communicate to him, whether
mm,
it was while he was still here or some of the harder things that would have caused
mm,
conflict in our relationship. That's part of the grief process, being able to speak your emotional truth. So everybody's grief experience is individual and
yeah,
unique. And so that those are the rituals that your mom, if that's how she feels close to him. I don't know when someone else is going to feel complete. To me, complete feels like when the tears are no longer, gosh, this is an interesting question because I've not really put words to this question
perfect.
and how I feel complete.
Yeah.
There's nothing left unsaid
Mm,
between my dad and I. Let me go back to another huge loss of mine, which was a divorce after 25 years
mm,
to a partner
mm,
who was not self-aware. He medicated with alcohol and was very emotionally and verbally abusive.
yeah.
That took a lot more work, introspection, a lot more of me sharing my emotional truth, because I didn't have a platform to do that in the marriage without having all of that shame or something's wrong with me because I'm feeling this way type thing.
Mm,
So that process took much longer to get complete with.
mm,
But that relationship feels complete to me now because in February at our son's wedding, I was able to have a nice visit and a nice conversation with him. And the anger wasn't present, the
mm,
sadness wasn't present, the shame, the
mm,
guilt, all of those things
mm,
from that old life. So it is a process. I'm probably going to be 95 and still having this conversation with people. And there are still going to be losses that are occurring regularly in my life. So I'm going to have to be applying these tools to get
yeah.
to that place of recovery on a regular basis. It's like a car wash, Jamal. You go through the car wash after, a monsoon here in Tucson, and the car's all dusty and dirty, and it gets rinsed, it gets washed, it gets rinsed again, it gets dried, it gets polished. It looks fantastic, right? We're all cleaned up. So, but then we go out and get it dirty again because that's just life. We can't just leave it in a garage. And even if we did then, it would still get dirty.
Right.
So it's like wash and repeat, wash
Mm,
and repeat.
mm,
Cyclical people. And as you said, the one constant is change. So it's just a matter of plugging that process back in.
yeah. I appreciate the one, your humility as I think I've come to a similar answer when people ask, well, how do I know when I'm healed? Or how do I know when I'm done healing? And I've also had people say like, oh, well, I've rebuked that thought to where people are always healing. And I'm like, well, for me, health is the intellectual ability to adapt. So for me, I'm like, if you're not healing, you're still adapting, but you're maladapting. So there's more breakdown, there's more sickness. And it is a constant because I think that something's moving towards more life or moving towards more death. And I think that's just a natural, for me, a natural lens to health. But when it comes to like healing a certain pattern, or I'll say like a relationship with someone, say who's alive, it's like, well,
Mhm.
how do I know that I've healed? You can engage with that person and there's not the emotional charge. So I do think that there's some truth in that when it comes to grief. And, I think that there's layers and levels and, you might be working through the tools or you might smell something that reminds you of someone or something or a relationship. And you can be able to observe that thought versus just being all consumed by the thought and then the accompanying emotion and then the accompanying story. He left me, they left me, XYZ, because that's where I think we begin to really suffer and experience mental anguish and pain from the stories we tell ourselves based upon our life circumstances and events that happen for us and because of us.
Yeah. And just the awareness around it. Just the
Mm,
awareness, journaling. What are my thoughts on a regular basis when I'm interacting with this person, with that person? If things are going really well, what are my thoughts? If things feel like the world is against me, what are my thoughts? And also, like, what are your belief system because of those thoughts? So really it's about, you hit on it, rituals. It's also about we are the created, and getting to know ourselves and getting to know the creator. That is going to bring, from in my world, that has brought a foundation to go back to, I just know. I know if I'm created, I have a purpose and I'm loved.
mm,
And there's a reason that I'm here. We can't miss our callings. We just can't, because we're amazing created beings. And so part of the process, I approach it from intellectual, emotional, physical. I bring a little bit of faith into it because that's also a huge loss when things happen in our life that maybe we've been praying for the opposite. And then this all knowing, almighty creator who created everything doesn't give us what we want. That's a loss of faith. That can put a lot of people into a crisis of faith. People
absolutely.
leave, they leave whatever spiritual upbringing that they had, because they just can't conceptualize, well, one day it was like this and the next it was like this, and it must be God's fault. And so, I mean, that's another huge component when we're talking about grief.
Mm.
So another one of the big losses.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, in a provider world, what I've noticed is that, some are like, it's tough for me to put a percentage on it, but I'd say there's a substantial percentage who may, I don't want to say don't believe in anything. I don't know why the word's escaping me right now. Like they don't have a religion or whatever it may be. And
Mhm.
what I'm not offering is for people to be religious, but what I'm offering is that I found it to be highly beneficial when people see themselves as a part of something bigger than themselves.
Yeah,
Whether it's they understand that we're an expression of this beautiful intelligence, where they believe in God, Creator, Allah, universe, whatever it may be.
mhm,
Even just the word universe, it means one verse, one thing. And I think for my people who are very sensitive in particular, like there's a lot of people, I'm an empath, and I also think that all humans are empathetic. Some are just more sensitive to others, and I think that's also a superpower. And one thing that I think you said that was very important was when people aren't experiencing or expressing their emotional truths. And if I'm like, all right, if they're not expressing their truths, they're repressing it, suppressing it, or they're expressing an emotional lie. And then also, they might be scared to feel the bigness. Like I've heard some people say, like, oh, I haven't had the time or the space to grieve this because if I grieve or if I feel this will take me out. So with that being said, what are some big strategies that you found to be very beneficial that help people break down this grief elephant in so many different ways?
great question. The grief elephant. I love that. And
Nice.
the answer is one bite at a time, little
Yeah.
tiny baby steps. Education, practical application. Education, practical application. Uh, Heal, let's go back to that word. Heal, that's a verb. That's an action word. And so we can take in all the information that we want, but until we're practically applying components and whatever that is. Some people use art as their expression of grief, and they move through a season by expressing that on a canvas. Others sing, others play instruments. There's so many different creative outlets to that, but that's just going to go down. That's just going to come back to grief is so individual and grief is so unique. And again, we want to have one answer, but could I compare my loss, one of my losses, with yours? Have you ever been in that situation? Let me ask you that question. Have you ever
Yeah,
been in
some
a
people
situation?
might just compare.
Sure. Well, something happened to you and it was like really big, and you start sharing it, and then someone else walks in a room that they just experienced maybe a miscarriage or the death of like something that we would consider a huge loss. And then
Yeah,
what does that do? Kind of shuts us down.
yeah,
Oh, I don't want to talk about that. Mine is so tiny in comparison. I still feel my loss 100%.
yeah.
You still feel yours 100%.
Right,
You know,
right.
so I find that a lot with working with people. But coming back around to your question, it's so big sometimes. And yeah, it is. It is so big because that's just how we're made. We're made to feel big. And with big, huge, I'll call them negative emotions. I don't think any emotions are really negative, but the ones that
I
hurt
agree.
more, without that, the ability to feel those, we wouldn't have the polarity to feel the intense joy and the intense compassion and the intense love for our fellow humans that we feel. And so with the program that I've written, the Grief Heal program, I give there's it's a 12-week program, and every day there's something to do. There's something either intellectual, there's something emotional, or there's something physical to do to get you out of the old patterns of how you deal or don't deal with your emotions, and just becomes part of your normal routine. There's movement recommendations, there's breath recommendations, there's learning recommendations. If we keep seeing grief the way we used to as taboo, how are we ever going to feel comfortable enough to talk about it, let alone remove the shame, let alone move it through our own bodies in a productive, practical way? And so, one bite at a time, my friend.
That's one other component, which I read this book in grad school. Shout out to Dr. Jordan Bonham. And I think it's called Shame. There was a semicolon. It said spiritual suicide. It was like
Ooh.
80 pages, I think. And I lost my copy as I'm saying this. I need to get it again. Um, but my question for you is, how would you recommend, or what have you found to be very, very powerful in helping remove, transmute, or reduce the energy and emotion of shame and guilt?
The lowest vibrating frequency out there.
Right. Keep going.
Shame. So I did a beautiful workshop at Iron Crane this past Saturday, and there were a group of about 15 or 16 women, and every one of them, when I explained what grief was and told them that they've been miseducated and that there's a way to come to completion, to find their way to joy and to happiness, every one of them perked up and lit up. And when I said the word shame, embarrassment, and told a little bit of my story, they perked up a little bit more. It's like people are hungry for permission to speak their truth. Just like when we were little kids and we went to our parents and said, "This is my truth. I'm hurting." And we were told, "Don't cry." Like that permission was taken away from us. So just having simple conversations. Hey, I can see that you're really struggling with something right now. Can I help you? Just that. When somebody dies, what
Mm.
is typically said?
Mm. Oh man, I have not answer that in this
I-
moment.
I'm sorry for your loss.
Oh, got it. Yes, yes. I'm sorry
Intelle-
for your loss.
Intellectually, that might be true.
Sure.
But let me just submit this question. Tell me what happened. That's a hard question to ask because what if they feel bad? What if I make them cry? What if they, well, here's the truth of the matter. They're supposed to cry. Their heart is broken. So I'm sorry. Well, I just made that about me.
Oh, wow. Hmm.
So I submit what happened. Tell me how you're feeling right now and just listen.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I was going to ask you what a for you what a conversation means to you, and what came in was how do I say this? It's an exchange. So it's like something's offered, or like you're saying, something is submitted, shared, and then something's received, and then demonstrated that's received in so many different ways. And I just love that simple invitation because I think conversations is or are the main tool that we have as human beings, nonverbal.
Hmm.
Even just being able to just give someone a glance, uh,
Yeah,
just being able
definitely.
to hold eye, just breathing and being with them, that can be just enough to just set it off, even though someone might have had many a conversation,
Yeah.
just feel fully, express fully, and express, which can't be. Nature is just so beautiful because we can be able to see, a blade of grass doesn't deny its existence. Of course, it doesn't have a mind of its own per se, where it might have the opportunity to grieve all of the patches of grass that might not be getting the nutrients it wants, which is where I think the responsibility of being a human and having this prefrontal cortex and the ability to think and know that we can think and therefore we are, I think it's just so, oh, it's for me all this whole conversation thus far. It's just an invitation to go to the depths because I think one thing TC said that's beautiful is that I also think there is no negative emotions. They're just emotions, and well, that's where the story of well, what's our relationship to them, and that is where we
Hmm.
can start to unpack certain things.
Yeah. I call that BS. It's our belief system. It's also our bullshit.
Ah,
And in
that's
that
good.
sort
I
of,
never heard that. Is that a TC
it,
original?
no, I don't know. Our
Yeah, I don't
BS,
know.
right?
Spirit told me.
Yeah, right.
That's our BS. That's our belief systems. That is funny.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
So,
giving people the invitation. Tell me
mm,
about you. Tell me what you're thinking. Tell me what you're feeling in this moment. And just knowing that it's perfectly fine, however you're feeling. After workshops, I get people come up to me and ask questions. How many losses? How do I know when I'm done? I don't feel things the way other people say. I'm not emotionally aware. What are all these emotions? I know sad, I know mad, I know, you know, most people's EQ, right, is pretty limited because it's typically just not taught. So
mm,
just offering space without your advice.
nope.
Nobody needs advice. Nobody wants to be told what to do. I mean, they want to be presented with information and tools
Potentially,
if they're
they already have so much information that they're already trying to figure out. Where
yeah.
people, I think, are, oh, I'm so sorry for your loss. And I'm like, God, the weight of that. I'm just like, ugh. Like, how many times does a person hear that? They're like, it's okay, or thank you, or whatever it may be. All are acceptable answers. There's no prescribed answer what thing you need to respond in. But I'm just appreciating I'll just say the gravity of, what can be apparent and what can be alive in people in our society because we have this touchy relationship with death in ourselves. And that could be passed on to us, of course, from mom or parents to children, and then the family dynamics, and then how's the family not process things. And I just think the invitation, well, tell me how you feel if you would like to, or, let me know. I'd love to know how are you doing truly, and
Yeah.
And then just being able to just shut up and be able to hold space as I think in some of the different experiences that I've had where it's like breath work or there's an opportunity to reflect or things, being able to ask a question, then just shut up and then even shut up longer than you think you need to. And just like TC's nodding her head, yes, like just being able to take someone in and they might just keep going and going and going. And that's where they might, like I was at a men's circle last night at my house with some brothers in Tucson, and just the ability to just say it and have a space to just say it can be healing and can shift things if that's hard to grasp. It can shift your energy. It can shift the potential breakdown processes that are going on in your body that you don't even know of.
Yeah.
And it's all because you're not expressing truth emotionally from here.
Yeah. Let's talk throat chakra.
Mm,
Open it up. Make
mm.
way for the heart to express.
Make way. Mm,
Yeah. We don't want to be uncomfortable, Jamal. We don't want to know about people's pain. We don't want to know what they're
mm,
going through. It's all
mm,
messy. That's a
mm.
BS.
I
That's
can't hold
BS.
space for this, or I don't know what to do.
Yeah. Well, here's the reality. We don't have to do anything. Just be there.
Ah,
Just be in their presence. Give them
say that
your
again.
presence. Give them your presence.
Oh, give it to them.
Yeah.
Mm,
Maybe just touch them, you know? I don't know. It's individual. Go with your heart and just be there for them.
just be there. Just
What
be.
happened? What happened? People want to tell their story. They want to know that it matters. They want permission to speak about things that our society tells us is taboo.
Mm. Ooh, I got a good question.
Mhm.
How do you differentiate someone who might be stuck in the story and gets almost addicted, or they just keep looping like their story and they're A, not aware of it, or B, it's even being reflected to them? Like how would you engage with someone that's just they're just in their story and they've told it, who knows, maybe 100 times, and
Mhm.
they're just now addicted to the emotions that they feel when people feel for them.
Yeah, that's a total huge thing. So the question that I like to ask is, how does that feel? And sometimes I get a look like, what? I don't know how it feels. This is just my story. Well, and then just kind of, again, give them another platform. Just ask those questions. Where do you feel that in your body? Oh, it makes me so mad. Where do you feel that? God, I feel it like right here. Or the heaviness of sadness. We carry that in our lungs, you know?
Yeah.
Oh, well, not everybody, but
Yep.
where do you feel it? How does that feel? Just bringing them back to emotions. Cool story, bro, but how are you feeling that? What's the emotion attached to that? And I've become really good at being compassionate enough, but being really direct. Like
Nice.
like sometimes I just want to say, I have a hat. I should have wore it. It says good, good, just good. So when I hear these stories, and let me just say, I was that person, Jamal. I
Ooh,
was that
ooh,
person
ooh.
that I didn't know what else to do. I
Right,
was talking till I was blue in the face. I was paying a counselor to go talk. I was paying money
right,
to go talk
right,
because
right.
that's the only thing that I knew how to do. That's what all my expert friends told me to go do. You need to go talk to somebody about this. Because I talked to all my girlfriends and they were probably like, girl, stop.
Girl.
And so then I paid somebody to listen to me. And
Yeah.
I was still frustrated and I was still exhausted. And and then I had a person say, look at all these things you've lost. Maybe you need to grieve this stuff. Oh, yeah. Even though there was good coming out of most of these situations, I was still grieving. Can I ask you a question?
Oh, I love it when my guests ask me questions. I'm like, oh yeah, let's chop it up. What you got?
So, you are starting a brand new adventure with
Mm,
your chiropractic practice.
yeah.
Huge. That's huge. That's a huge celebration.
Thank you.
Yes. How do you process that change as
Mm,
loss? Because
God.
do you recognize that your patterns and habits are all going to be in a very different space with very different people? Your
Yeah.
normal routine is going to look a little bit different.
Yeah.
So, and not that it needs to be this big, huge, thing, but just recognizing and honoring that that is change. You've got a lot of new things on your plate. You're going to have a
Yeah.
lot, things are just going to be changing.
Yeah. And it's been beautiful to be able to, one, recognize, oh yeah, nah, this is grieving, and that's where, I've had, my brothers, Dr. Evan, Dr. Ellie, Dr. Noah, they've all gone their own adventures. Noah's created the Source Dallas, Ellie's in Puerto Rico, Evan went back home to the Northeast. And it's just so great to celebrate. And that's a part what I was grieving this year is just those big, big changes. And I'm grateful for the tools and tool set, and even more so my tool set, my community that always checks in. Like people have checked in, like, how are you doing with that? Like asking those exact questions that you're asking, like, how has it been? Or, where are you at? And, I got to feel so deeply at facilitator camp with my KTC folk and really got to like have permission to like feel sad, like put on the saddest fucking song that I knew on the nature of daylight
You played that
by
for me, by the way,
oh
remember?
yeah. And I got the chance to just feel, and
Mm.
oh my God, it just felt good because then we got to then experience the other side, which is like joy and happiness. So it was fascinating to feel the emotional range so potently. But, being here, of course, like I know I'm not going to be around my work nucleus or my primary nucleus and of people and circles. But I think my friend Annalise was the one that reflected it the best. She's like, Jamal, all you're going to be doing is you're just going to be relating to your people differently. And previously, like I remember a quick story. When my boys Hopper and Nick Limblom were graduating when I was a sophomore in undergrad from track, they were two of my great friends, relay mates, and I just remember crying uncontrollably,
Mm.
like at the ceremony. Like I cried for like an hour straight. I could not stop crying. And Hopper like gave me shit. He's like, oh, whatever the hell Hopper said. But I didn't understand it. But then when people would graduate my graduate program and brothers would graduate or people that I loved graduate or they would move, it's like I would feel this very big transition and I would feel like I think that I would feel all of the emotions, like the death of like us relating to each other, how we used to and how we were accustomed to and how we loved, and the also the gratitude of like, all right, they're gonna go into building their family or building their dream, or so it's feeling all of that in transition. And it wasn't until like this last transition, it's that you're relating to people differently, or you may relate to people differently, but that doesn't mean there needs to be this, I'll say like it's I don't know how to say it's this big bad thing or heavy thing. And that's where I think I like the term, and I'd love to hear your perspective on it. Celebrating someone's life, like at a funeral. It's like, yeah, I'm going to a life celebration versus, oh, I'm going to a funeral. I was like, oh, wow, similar stimulus, different perspectives, different energies. Would you be willing to speak to that more?
Sure, absolutely. And thank you for sharing that with your transition that you're going through. It doesn't always have to be when you're going through the process and you're able to speak your truth about it, you're able to cry, feel the emotions. That's all part of the process instead of
Yeah.
suppressing it.
Yeah.
So, end of life stuff. Again, societal views around death. You're going to have very specific people that are very traditional. They want to go and they want to have the specific funeral procession and the open cat.
Yeah.
It's just ritual. It's just what they're used to. And other people have a very different perspective on it. Celebration of life.
Yeah.
So each person is unique and individual, and none of it's right, none of it's wrong. I want to have a celebration. I'm all about woohoo, let's party.
Mm.
And I like you have written out my end of life, my eulogy, and it's fascinating when you look at it from the end of your life, how it changes the perspective on your life. I think self-awareness the ability to think outside the box. How do we want to celebrate this person? How do we want to, commemorate a life? I was going to say a life well lived, but that's perspective too.
Hmm.
So I have
Hmm.
some really great friends who are death doulas. So
Yeah, that's been a new term for me. Like the last year, I was like, "Hey, I'm a death duel." I was like, "Oh, tell me more."
isn't that cool?
It is. It is.
And that just speaks to the word celebration.
Mm,
Typically a birth doula is is teaching and coaching and walking beside a new
right.
mom, a mom
Very
who's
revered at that. They're very revered.
sure, absolutely, because they're helping to bring life into the world. And so the stigma, the belief system around death and what it is, we tend to mourn that instead of celebrate, the life that was lived. And I think, I mean, my beliefs lead me to that's a death of this body, but that's a freedom in my spirit. So
Ooh.
how, to me that's a celebration. So I want people
Ooh.
to know how much I loved them while I was here on this earth. I want to celebrate this rite of passage, which is death. I don't want to be in pain, but you know,
Sure.
I know where I'm going, and I don't fear any of that.
Mm,
So it's a unique and individual experience. So I've been to both. I've been to celebration of lives that
mm,
were absolutely beautiful, where everybody got up and spoke and had the ability to process what they were going
mm,
through. They were able to cry with no shame. They were able to share whatever they needed to share with no shame.
mm.
And funerals to me just have a very different feel, just typically because of the nature of we're mourning a death, we're not celebrating a life perspective.
Yeah. Either no, I'm not. I don't want to impinge my beliefs on anybody, my BS. People are entitled to have whatever perception is that they want, whatever feels
Absolutely.
good. Like it's all
Absolutely.
for me. It's all. I could say it's all good. If I were to get more specific, it's all how you want to perceive it.
I call it a God language.
Hmm. Tell me
how
more.
i how I talk about God in the language that I use to express that belief is different than the language other people talk about God.
Yeah.
So God language. So
Sure.
and somehow, and I because of again old belief systems, we tend to be I don't want to walk on anybody else either. I'm here. My belief system says show the love of God to everybody, and if necessary, use your words. I want people to know how much I love them by being in my presence. And if necessary, I can use my words, right? And so I think that not knowing ourselves and not taking that time to have self-awareness and really get to understand ourselves might tend to create an offensive situation with people, whether we're talking about our spiritual beliefs, whether we're talking about our emotional beliefs, whether we're talking about our wellness beliefs. I talk to people
Mm.
every day that are in the medical community, and we have very, very different beliefs because we have very different training. That
Yeah.
doesn't mean I'm offended or they're offended by what I do. Can we appreciate everybody for their hearts and sometimes set our belief system aside so we can make a real and lasting and true heartfelt connection with the people that we come into contact with.
If there's one thing thus far that you've gained from this episode, may it be this like softness. Um, Man, I would love. I feel like everyone needs a TC.
I
Kind of
love
just like a
it,
great
Jamal.
anchor in the community. And if people, I want to know what you got cooking. Like, how can people understand grief more that want to go beyond this episode?
That is a really, really great question. I have moved my one-on-one practice and my small group practice to my online program.
Woo,
And yes, it's in soft launch mode right now. I
woo.
have I have some guinea pigs that are testing it out for me to keep me accountable to make sure
Mm,
that the contents that I promised are really in there, that it's a really easy, accessible, and manageable, taking those little bites of that grief elephant. Um, process, and it's going to launch in January, full
Ooh,
on live launch. So I will send you all the pertinent information with the website and all my socials, and
perfect.
people can find me there.
Perfect. Well, by the time this episode drops, it's probably going to be I believe we're going to be episode 101.
Woo! Good.
Yeah, 101, maybe 102, but I imagine you'll be dropping towards the end of this year, if not beginning of next year. So it's gonna be perfect and right on time.
Yeah.
Man, I feel like we've covered some good bases, misconceptions, previous paradigms on death, belief systems, some societal agreements that are in play. TC, if anything, what's one thing you really, really want to make sure people know about grief in any capacity at all that we might have not talked about this far?
Oh, that we haven't talked about. Ah, I'm just going to go back to the definition. It's natural and normal.
Mm.
Natural and normal. It's a natural
Nice,
response to life.
nice.
And and there is a process to get
Mm,
to the lighter joy and peace and
mm.
and out of the heaviness of it. And really embrace it. Embrace
Oh,
it because it's a part of us. And the one thing that I know once I learned how to move grief through my life is my relationships became so much deeper because all of those
mm.
walls I had up and all of that anger and frustration and shame and pain inside, once I finally gave voice to that, it just made so much more room to hear people, to enjoy people, to connect
Oh,
with people. And I'd walk through it all again if I had to,
wow.
because I mean, it's my story. It's where I'm at. And I've taken that experience and I've taken my education and I've turned it into my passion, talking to
Hmm.
others, giving them the ability to share their hearts with me. And for me to say, I hear you, can I help? Here's some tools I'm offering. If you want to pick them up and take them, I'll keep encouraging you to use them.
Mm, man. Yeah, I just love that last reminder. One of my favorite movies. I won't say which one because I don't want to spoil it, but just one of the main characters. She just talks about if you knew how your life would go from beginning to end, would you change anything?
Mm,
And it's interesting to hear people's responses. And then she goes, when asked to her, she goes, no. She just goes, I'd make sure I embrace it all.
yeah.
And then boom, in comes on the nature of daylight, and your heart just like, "Ah!"
I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
I wish I remember which movie that I was watching that expressed this ritual. It was like Game of Thrones kind of movie. It might have even been Game of Thrones. And they lost one of their brothers in arms, and his body's laying out on the table, and all around him, from head to toe, all around him are his brothers, these big, huge, strapping men. And they're pounding their chest and they're yelling and they're weeping. They're moving their grief out. It was the most
Mm,
beautiful thing I've ever seen. I rewound it, I don't know how many times. It was the most
mm.
beautiful
Ooh,
ritual I've
I got
ever
chills.
seen.
Whew.
Yeah. Yeah. So embrace it. Embrace it as a natural part of who you are,
Mm,
because it is.
yeah,
Emotions are all natural.
yeah. All
Natural and normal.
natural, baby, all
Or
organic. You can't fake
natural.
these emotions. Tell you what, they might try to biochemically alter them, but man, you still are the pharmacy.
You still are the pharmacy. That's right.
Yeah, man.
That's right. Embrace it.
Man, well, TC, I'll be sure if this episode resonated with you, you got some friends that are struggling or need more potential awareness with grief, please share it with them. Leave a 5-star review and check out TC's course. Check out her online, her socials and things too. She's here in Tucson with me. Just want to give her some special love as she helped craft the website for the Tucson Health and Wellness Collective as well too. She's been one of the originators in that capacity as well. So just want to give you some love and flowers in that capacity, sis. And I got one last question for you before we
Yeah.
close the episode out, and it's a soul coffee question. And it's if you were to describe your flavor or process of soul coffee to the world, what would it be?
Oh my gosh. Well, I like things original. Like I like my coffee original with a
Yeah, yeah.
little teeny tiny hint of cream, no sugar.
Mm.
Uh, you're not asking me how I like my coffee, are you?
I am, and at the same time, it's also just an expression of what's your soul's flavor of coffee. So I think when people describe that and or they describe their coffee, it's just very telling.
Unique and original with a little hint of flavor.
Yeah, yeah. A lot of ownership in this brew. A lot of ownership in this brew. Ain't no running away from that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Give it,
love it.
I want it real. I want it real.
I want a real.
I want it real.
No synthetic beans out here.
No, no, no.
Beautiful. Y'all.
Thank you for what you do.
Oh man, you got me. I'm so
Oh,
grateful. I feel like this has been a time coming. I knew from when I met this woman, we talked about grief. I was like, oh, we need to talk about this. So shout out to Bex for introducing us, of course, as well too. Had some good sushi, I believe, that day.
that's right.
Um, but man, I am committed, and I'm committed to this. Tell you what, one Soul Coffee episode each week with me having the freedom and the clarity. I'll just say the more organization of my schedule. I'm dedicated one episode a week, effort to release them Monday mornings and amass some support as well too with me because y'all are important. And after another successful year, positive reviews, etc. Man, I'm just fired up to really get after it because there's a lot more podcasts out and shit. And I'm like, huh, well, I like competition as well too, but it's all just making me produce a better experience, a better product for y'all. So if y'all ever have any feedback, you already know, just hit me up. I'm a slut for feedback. Tell you what, I love me some feedback. So just an invitation for all my people that listen. Thank you for the 1,500 plus subscribers. I love you. I appreciate you. Until next episode. Peace.